Worlds 2024's Swiss stage is over. We now have our 8 quarterfinal teams ready to fight it out in the final knockout stage of the tournament. So who is left? Who has now left us? And how is the Worlds meta shaping up? Let's get into it. Alright, so the first of the round 4 Swiss stage games was between Top Esports and DK. Last episode we talked about DK needing to prove themselves against a non-Western team, and unfortunately that is still the case after this. In game 1, DK's scary scaling comp tried to keep pace with Top Esports, who were determined to not let them reach the end game, winning successive team fights in the early to mid game and banging on the Nexus around the half-hour mark. Game 2 did not get off to a good start for DK, with Mohan gifting over first blood on Leona. A series of close and bloody mid-game team fights swung in favor of both teams at times, but after securing Baron, Top Esports were able to stand behind 369's beefy Cassante and push for the win, handing an Eastern team their first loss on Yone at the tournament. Top Esports moved on, but DK would have one more chance to advance. FlyQuest kept things fairly close in their first game against Hanwha Life and won some big team fights in the mid-game, but when Hanwha got the team fight they were looking for at 32 minutes, they immediately closed out the game. FlyQuest hit back in game 2 with some decisive early team fights that allowed them to stack dragons and for Bwipo's Olaf to run through Hanwha at will, tying up the series at 1-1. But the North Americans were brought back down to earth in game 3 after Hanwha started picking up kills on both sides of the map, allowing Viper to pick up an insurmountable gold lead and for Hanwha Life to close out the game and series at the 30-minute mark. Next up, we had G2 versus T1. Game 1 was a tale of two lanes, as T1's top and G2's bot got ahead early, but it was T1 who won the crucial team fights, allowing them to finally crack open the game and take the win. Game 2 was a game of inches in the early game, in which T1 edged out a slight lead. G2 managed to pick up some great picks in the mid-game, but as they tried to end, T1 found the team fight they were looking for and were able to swing things right back in their favor and take the series 2-0. Now, nobody expected BLG to be sitting at 1 win, 2 losses going into this round, and they still looked a bit shaky during their series versus PSG. They made some poor mistakes in the early game of game 1, and PSG looked poised to take the win for large stretches of the game, but Bin and his famous Jax stepped up when the game was hanging in the balance and BLG clawed themselves back for the win. BLG looked more comfortable in game 2 with Knight's Jace racking up a huge lead in the early game. PSG were able to play around that for the most part, but once again it was a TP flank from Bin's Jax that crushed PSG at Baron and helped his team find the 2-0 series win not long after. Fnatic fell behind early to Weibo in game 1 of their series, but yet another Jax flank at Worlds 2024 helped them even things up and set up a game-winning team fight at the 35-minute mark. Unfortunately for Fnatic, that was the high point of their series. In game 2, Light's Ezreal and Breeze's Jax built an insurmountable lead to win the game, and in game 3, Fnatic looked desperate as they tried and failed to claw back a 5k gold lead for Weibo, who took the game and the series 2-1. Gam's Jungle and Mig got ahead early in their game 1 versus Team Liquid. TL somehow managed to win teamfights despite a 6,000 gold deficit, but the lethal Vi shockwave delivery system eventually won Gam the game. Team Liquid evened up the series 1-1 with a dominant game 2 featuring some monstrous Nico ults from APA, and they were able to carry that momentum into another comfortable win in game 3, while Gam's World's journey came to a close. In game 1 of the last chance series between DK and Weibo, both teams looked incredibly even until the half-hour mark, where Weibo took an inhib in exchange for soul points, which seemed to be the right decision as DK eventually out-team fought Weibo across the board to take the series lead. Weibo evened things up 1-1 in the series though with the help of Tarzan's jungle brand pick, which DK struggled to find an answer for. DK looked stronger in game 3 with some solid early team fights, but Weibo held out with the help of a monstrous game from Breeze's Gnar, which led to the game and series being all wrapped up by the 35-minute mark. BLG seem to remember that they're the LPL champions in game 1 of their elimination series versus G2, where a dominant LeBlanc game from Knight helped them snag the victory. That seemingly lit a fire under Caps, who had a similar performance in game 2, but with Silas, and G2 were able to even up the series before 30 minutes. It was fitting that game 3 3 was the closest of the series, with teamfights being fought on a razor's edge, but the scales eventually tipped in the LPL's favour to seal G2's exit from Worlds 2024. The final series of the round was a North American civil war between FlyQuest and Team Liquid, where Quad's Oriana ended up with a ridiculous 10-0-6 KDA in Game 1 to give Fly the series lead. TL struggled to close out Game 2 despite a large early lead, but eventually got it done off the back of a massive Impact Rumble game. But in Game 3, Fly proved to everyone why they're North America's #1 seed and TL are #2. Unanswered picks and dragon stacking created a terrifying bot lane for them, and they had the series all wrapped up before 30 minutes. So there we have it. These are your remaining Worlds 2024 teams. Most of the qualified teams are who you might have expected, although FlyQuest advancing and DK failing to might have upset a few pick'ems out there. The quarterfinals on Thursday through to Sunday will see LNG face off against fellow LPL squad Weibo, and will live take on fellow first seed BLG. Top Esports lock horns with current reigning world champions T1, and FlyQuest will be looking to prove everyone wrong by knocking out MSI champions Gen G. But before that, it's time to discuss how the Worlds meta has been shaping up with Wetselaar, who's been on the ground for us at Worlds this year.
All right, so obviously going into this tournament, there was a huge patch, and now that the Swiss stage is over, we can start to talk a little bit about the meta. It's shaping up to actually be a really interesting tournament, but everyone agrees that there are two picks that are completely overpowered, Aurora and Yone. These are the highest presence picks on the patch by far. Aurora specifically actually has a 94% presence, and going into the last day of Swiss, it was 100. In terms of Yone specifically, we all saw Scout absolutely dominate on this pick at the beginning of Swiss. It's actually easy to forget how scary he looked because it's been about a week since LNG played any games, but this is absolutely a champion that the best mids and tops in the world can use to just pop off. And it makes sense that teams are just starting to ban these champions away because every single player we talk to agrees they are just busted.
因为感觉现在的版本，有人就是发育打到一些很多英雄都是没有什么压力的，就是他能很好的那个过渡到中期，然后有破败和挺进这两件装备之后，就会很好发挥吧。
Well, they just buffed his Q by 20 damage, which is pretty huge considering he spams this spell like 5 times in just one trade. So that just gives him so much more damage, and he was also pretty good before the buff. So this buff just makes him really OP.
So obviously this summer we saw this really distinctive meta that was focused around AD mids. That has been almost entirely thrown out. These days, we're playing a more traditional combination of AD junglers with a range of mages in the mid lane, and we have seen a few teams be a little bit resistant to the patch. They're trying to make things that were really strong in the summer, like the Tristana mid, work. To me, I don't think that's what we're gonna see heading into the bracket. It just feels like a bit of stubbornness.
Some teams, especially Eastern teams, are still playing a lot of the AD carries, which is, I feel like, being a bit stuck in the past, but you see a lot more mages, you see a lot more AD junglers instead of AP junglers. On top lane, you see more Gnar, more Jax, these kind of things. I would say mostly what changed is mid and jungle role in terms of variety of champions, which I think is beautiful. I think the mid jungle is usually the core of what else everyone is playing.
But one of the craziest picks by far of the entire tournament actually came from one of our NA hopefuls, FlyQuest.
Nunu it's a Nunu lock-in!
Yeah, Inspired actually picked Nunu. It's the first time we've seen this since 2017 at the World Championship, and they shocked everyone in the world by actually taking a game against the LCK's #1 seed, Hanwha Life.
The Nunu pick caught me completely off guard, and I think it's safe to say it caught the other team off guard as well, because when I saw Doran try to TP out and he was like, oh, there's no snowball, I'm fine. And then watch him just get stuck by the route afterwards, I was like, oh man, he doesn't know how this goes. So, and even on objective takes, they were like, oh no, this is fine. This Baron's at 3000 HP. There's no way Nunu can steal this. So I think there was a lot of learnings coming through in that series for Hanwha, but I think it was a great pick. Personally, I think it's when you can throw enemy teams through a loop like that, it only helps you in a series, because either you then force something like a ban on towards the pick in the later portion of the series, or teams always have to be aware of it.
Okay, look, I'm not saying that Nunu is going to be a power pick and take over the jungle for the rest of the tournament or anything like that, but clearly the Swiss stage showed there's a lot of room for flexibility and creativity, and I can't wait to see what the best teams in the world cook up when we finally get to Paris.
So there we go. Another week of Worlds has gone by, and we're now left with 8 teams who have proven their worth in what I think has been one of the most exciting stages of any Worlds I've ever seen. The Swiss stage has been an incredible but brutal new format for Worlds, and no team has advanced out of it by accident. Who do you think will make it to the semi-finals, to the last 4? Have BLG finally recovered from their worrying start? Is the T1 Worlds buff now in full effect? Can Fly pull off the greatest upset of the year against Gen.g? And when will they or LNG be finally handed their first series loss? Let me know in the comments section, and tune in next week for another episode of The Last Hit.
Thanks for watching. If you want more content like this, hit the sub button and ring the notification bell. For unique bite-sized videos you won't find anywhere else, hit us up on our X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.